Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am Abiyasa Niagara as the host of today's debate. Now for the Prime Minister, please come to the podium to open the debate and define the motion. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I am the Prime Minister of the proposition group and I will define the motion. This House would eliminate age restriction for marriage. But firstly, we need to know what is age. So some researchers agree that age is the period of time since a person was born and can be measured using unit of time and can be viewed in terms of chronological, anatomical, and psychological development. Age also has limits that determine whether or not a person acts legally in carrying out legal actions. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, the age restriction is the age below or above which legalizes an individual to be able or not to do something. Then marriage. Sociologists define marriage as a legally recognized social contract between two people and traditionally based on a sexual relationship and implying a permanence of the union. And nowadays, marriage is not only done by adults, but young couples who have met the requirements can also get married. This is because maturity does not depend on age, but depends on intelligence or maturity of mind. That's why I strongly agree with eliminating age restriction for marriage. Following to the motion, I believe that age restrictions for marriage can be applied all over the world. Based on available data, South Korea is an example of a country in Asia that has low marriage and birth rates. Marriages in South Korea fell by 14.6% from the previous year and accounted for 6.8% of the country's total marriages. This decline was caused by several factors, but the most basic factors was the perception of citizens themselves. Many South Koreans set the appropriate age in marriage at least under a minimum age of 34 years old for men and 31 years old for women. Based on this phenomenon, we can learn together that if the marriage rate in a country is low, then what will happen? The lack of young people who will later support the country. Of course, it will affect the progress and survival of a country. Also, the low birth rate can disrupt politics and the economy, both domestically or internationally. Then, compared to Indonesia, marriage is allowed if the men and women are at least 19 years old for both. This regulation is contained in the Marriage Law Number 1 of 2019. However, in reality, there are so many couples under the age of 19 who are getting married early. Based on data obtained from the Directorate General of the Religious Courts Agency, there were 35,000 applications for marriage dispensation from January to June 2020. Of the total, 76% were granted and 60% of those who applied were children under 18 years old of age. It should be known that early marriage is not a new phenomenon both in Indonesia or in other countries. This proved that many citizens indirectly violate the regulation. So, the power of the policy is not enough to prevent early marriage. In fact, we know that rules are made to be obeyed together, not to be broken. So from this evidence, we can see that compliance of citizens to the rule of law needs to be questioned. Thus, it is better if the government reviews the policy regarding eliminating age restriction for marriage. On the other hand, religion sees marriage as an inner and outer bond between a man and a woman as a husband and wife with the aim of forming a happy and eternal family based on the one Godhead. Then the question is, what is religious perspective on this phenomenon? Of course, religion legalizes marriage regardless of age. That's why religion allows marriage but with certain conditions. The first is poverty. The second is financially and spiritually capable. And the last is getting parental and court approval. Thus, they can apply for marriage. Then, religion has a specific purpose in legalizing early marriage, so that young couples avoid free sex, which is clearly forbidden in this country. In line with the opinion above, according to the researchers, summarize several things related to the positive impact of early marriage. There are economic, sexual needs, prevent someone from having children in old age, and can reduce the burden on parents, because by marrying off their daughter, all the needs will be met by the husband. Based on the data, evidence, and the argument that have been presented, we should agree on eliminating age restriction for marriage. If anyone is still debating to this policy, I think they should look into the details. Also, they must look from a broad perspective and must not stick to the phenomena that exist in our country. In addition, the benefits or impacts of implementing to the policy are expected to be felt by several developed countries with low marriage and birth rates. Therefore, this House would totally agree with the eliminating age restriction for marriage. Thank you. Next is leader of the opposition to give the response towards Prime Minister argument.
Thank you for the opportunity. It is true that marriage contributes to the development of the national civilization, but this responsibility should not be given to children who still need to be nurtured and protected for their growth and development. Children are still not able to control their emotions and their thoughts to deal with household problems. Marriage at young age has various negative impacts, not only for the individual itself, but negative for the country. The impacts that occurs are the increasing number of maternal mortality rates, loss of educational opportunities, and even increasing the poverty rate of the country itself, which does not rule out the possibility of having a large inflation effect on the international scene. In line with that, the divorce rate will increase significantly. This is due to the unstable emotion of the children, which will cause a small contribution to cases of domestic violence. The Deputy for Population Control, the National Population and Family Planning Agency, or BPPN, stated that early marriage could trigger high divorce rates. According to the Statistic Indonesian report, the number of divorce cases in Indonesia in 2021 increased by 53.50% compared to 2020, which reached more than 2,100 cases. Young-age couples are usually not able to prepare for family life, so they are prone to divorce. In the 2017 revision of the Central Statistic Agency, or PPS, the percentage of women aged 20 to 24 years old who were divorced and had been married before the age 18 years old was 4.53%. 3.2%. Disputes, constant quarrels, and economic factors are the main factor of divorce until this day. Earlier, Mas Abi said that puberty was one of the factors that led early marriage. What we all need to know that puberty is not the main factor in making the decision to get married. Puberty doesn't mean you are allowed to get married at young age, because the physical condition of reproductive age is still very weak and has not been able to conceive and give birth. In line with this, the psychological impact will also be disturbed. The psychological effects that often occurs due to young marriage are anxiety, stress, and depression. Simban Karya said that mental readiness about marriage cannot be achieved at the age under 20 years old. On the other hand, young marriage also causes an increase in the poverty rate in a country. This is due to the low level of education taken by individuals. So that it is difficult to get a decent job to support his family, get a low wage, and eventually late poverty. Therefore, seeing the many negative impacts of early marriage, the age restriction for marriage does not to be removed, let alone choose past the clear reason. Many citizens feel this happen of the lack of socialization to the community, especially people in rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Times for Deputy of Prime Minister to respond.
Thank you for the opportunity. Okay, but I need to clarify here is about education opportunities for young mother. According to what the former Minister of Education and Culture, Muhajir Effendi said, even though was married, the right of children to get education will not be solved. Across the path is no longer the formal path, but no formal and informal education that can be option for the young mother in a religious faith. If a child has entered the age of puberty or the age of the puberty and is financial and mentally capable, then it is permissible to care of marriage with not the individual who will want the marriage, the raising of the partner and the government concerned. If they have not been able to fulfill this condition, they can cause the start or upright themselves with the opposite sex according to Islamic law until when they are ready the married mindset page. In line with this, the problem of interference marriage is a classic problem in Islam society. Even this form of marriage is practiced by Muslim since the emergence of Islam. For example, the Prophet ﷺ when married Siti Aisyah, who was still a minor and can decide a sunnah, decides that we know that marriage does not depend on age, but the or intelligence or maturity of man, because there are also children whose age is not yet mature, but he is already smart, and there are also people whose age is mature, but it means to mind is not yet mature. Therefore, anyone whose milk is mature and wants to get married and can be allowed. In education, regulating the negative impacts of health caused by early marriage, such careful can it be proven in various ways. We know that today young couple and those living in the 21 century, where all this must be reviewed using critical and working analysis. For example, checking with a doctor delaying pregnant and otherwise can prevent the negative effect of early marriage, according to Dr. Sania Syafiqka, a health expert, explained that if a partner is sexual intercourse under the age of 18, their will behavior is example of sexual transmission, such if this can happen to a lack of knowledge about healthy and safe sex, so the use of the contraception is still very low. Therefore, the steps that can be taken are to have a healthy lifestyle, so that sexual and reproduction health can be well maintained, as will increase knowledge about harmonious husband and wife relationship accord state with example now and Sharia. In the context of the discussion raised by Abiyasa, the argument still refers to develop countries may develop countries such South Korea, Japan, and others have experienced decline in the number of married due to the lack of asking their sons to get married. In fact, the government has announced for those going to get married. For example, Japan, based on 2015 by the National Institute of Population and Social Security Regulation. It was stated that the Japanese cabinet approved with a paying amount of money to newly married couple. The allowance is the worth 600,000. That is the government ready to pay extension to the because Japan has allowed divorce in the pursuit of marriage. On the part of young couple who are about to get married, there is not need to worry because the pollution already exists. Also is developed countries there are also many job opportunities and job training that can support the ability of young couple. Thank you.
Next is Deputy of Opposition to give the response.
Okay, well, thanks to the government team for giving me time to talk. I, from the opposition team, want to confirm what Drika has said. That eliminating the age limit for marriage has a lot of negative impact that will result in early marriage, including hindering aspects of education and self-development. It is necessary to explain once again the occurrence of child marriage, but there are still many parents who do not care about this. In some cases, parents actually think that children who marry young can be the savior study and develop their potential, interests, talent, and abilities. However, early marriage makes children do not have the opportunity to self-develop themselves. This reason will make a child life messy and disorganized. So early marriage can have an impact on closing the futures, especially for what you want and the opportunity to get higher education. There will also be an impact in the form of crisis of confidence. Emotional development is not fully developed. Cognitive impairment or not trying to make decisions, difficult solving problems, and impaired memory. Adolescent girls who are pregnant and give birth are prone to mental disorder after childbirth or baby blues syndrome. It should be noted that even people who get married at a mature age need social support. Early marriage is not a simple matter, and the impact will be very large and have an effect on human quality. The quality of human resource is determined by the younger generation. If teenagers are not enough and produce a generation that is not optimal, it will lose the opportunity to become a developed country. Regarding Drika's argument, the marriage of the Prophet Muhammad when he married Siti Aisyah who are still minors. First, we must understand that the meaning of maturity in 7th century Arabia is very different from the limitations of maturity that we have in the 21st century. At that time, adulthood means having entered puberty with sake of active sexual organs. Meanwhile, nowadays, adult means being able to act rational. Second, we must also remember in the context J was not as systemically remembered as it is now. Varies from 9 to 19 years, the concept of time and J at that time was very different. Contextualizations is the key to understanding the imperfections of history. Don't carry modern morality into the past. However, dig into the past to find moral values that can be translated into the present. Actually, the argument about involving religions is very irrelevant because in Indonesia not all people are Muslim. There is also the poverty rate in early marriage is also very high. In general, those who marry at the age of their children have low education and even drop out of school. This is prone to causing long-term impact on their families and has the potential to cause repeat poverty. Meanwhile, the average allowance can only be obtained by those who are married at an educated age. Those who marry early, on average, are not old enough and do not have sufficient provisions to work. In this case, those who marry at an early age still need an important stage in life to explore their potential. Even those who marry at an early age will lose the assets of teenagers who should be able to serve and take part in society. KPAI Chairman Susanto explained that child marriage is one of the problems that will have a long-term impact on Indonesia's human resources in the future. 2015, 23% of women had their first marriage before the age of 18. This means that child marriage will have an impact on the performance of the quality index of Indonesian women in the future. Another study showed a fact that is not much different, namely couple who marry young have a 38% risk of divorce after 5 years of marriage. The risk usually occurs in young couples who are unable to endure various problems and burdens of life, especially financial problems. Okay, that's all for me. Thank you.
Next, for the member of the government, please come forward to give your response.
Thanks to the opposition team for giving me time to talk. So let me get straight. I can be mentioned that the Prophet Muhammad SAW married Aisyah in history. It is true that when we look at its history, the Maqasid Sharia is what the purpose of the Prophet Muhammad SAW married Aisyah at the age of 6 years, but the Prophet had intercourse with her at the age of 9. So according to Imam Syafi'i or according to fiqh law, it is permissible to marry young with a record that she has reached puberty, has menstruated for women, and has had with dreams for men. As for the possibility of nationalists or scientists, according to their research factors, marrying underage affects children's education. But we must also consider that Islamic law may marry not limited by age, but when you already have the ability, both material and financial, and can burden the child's life, both education and daily needs. But if you don't know, personally in the future, it will change your fate, or instead it is risk. It is better to postpone and improve oneself. But in terms of proper education, materials, and fitness, and there is no explanation for getting married that even old age can change his fate. In young marriage, it is okay to not withhold education, future, and so on. But if young marriage only think about it and develop themselves, both financial and material, so it's okay to get married with a record that it can educate and can develop himself, his wife, and children. That's all my argument. Thank you.
Next is member of the opposition to give the response.
Okay, thank you for your argument, Annisa Fitriani. In Islam, there is no standard or definitive stipulation regarding the minimum or maximum age for marriage. But in the Quran, Surah An-Nur verse 33 also mentioned an advice for young people who have plans and desire to get married. Both men and women will commence restraint until he has the ability to marry in the first, which means, and those who are not able to marry should keep their chastity until Allah gives them the ability by His grace. Well, this definition of maturity is not only based on age. Many people are found who already have the ideal age to be mature, but in fact they are still childish. On the other hand, many are considered immature because they are young, but in reality, they can act maturely. Compared to the age above them, this maturity is capable of giving birth to the ability to carry out the function of marriage. As for the phenomenon of unarranged marriage today, there are some people who have the principle that it's not better to marry early than later to commit immorality and adultery. The principle of this marriage is based on the wish of the young couple or the wish of their parents. This phenomenon by Professor Shirly is termed as treating disease with the disease. Ideally, curing a disease is with an examination that can cure the disease. If there is a fear that a young couple will commit adultery, if they are not immediately married, then it is better to find a way to find and choose a less bad intent. This can be done by educating and preparing them with a level of understanding and proficiency. The function and preparing the family to children must also be further strengthened, such as the function of education, religion, psychology, which will fortify children from adultery. So, it's actually good if someone is afraid that their kid will commit adultery. But early marriage is not the right solution to solve it. There are also some people who marry early based on the life history of the Prophet when he married Siti Aisha, who was still young. However, the actual history of the marriage story of the Prophet who married the young Siti Aisha is also widely disputed for its authenticity by the scholar. Even if the history of the Prophet marrying Siti Aisha at a very young age is true, that someone who forced himself to marry someone at an early age is an arrogant and ignorant person. The reason is he considered himself the same as the Prophet. Meanwhile, the Prophet has special privilege and duties which are message from Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Of course, it would be not appropriate to use an excuse to demand the Prophet's marriage to do the same with the Prophet. Marriage in the Quran is referred to as Misakon Balizm, a strong agreement, because it is beyond by affection, trust, love, and can be realized later in marriage. So, after all, I cannot accept if this house will eliminate age restriction in marriage. And the question is, if you marry the young, let alone mature, can it all be real? Okay, that's all from me, and thank you.
Next is for wife of Prime Minister to give the conclusion.
Okay, so thanks for the opportunity. Marriage is an inner and outer bond between a man and a woman as husband and wife. According to our Prime Minister and also according to us as a government team, the abolition of the age limit for marriage is expected to increase marriage rates and birth rates in several countries that have low marriage rates and birth rates. For example, in South Korea. Then, let's think what will happen if the marriage rate is low. Of course, the country will lack the younger generation to define their country, right? Then, we talk about our own country, Indonesia. According to the marriage law number 1 of 2019, marriage is allowed if a man of the religious court agency, there were 34,000 applications for marriage dispensation during January to June 2020 because they were not ordinal. Then why make rules if in the end only to be broken? Would it be better to review it? Marrying young is also not wrong. According to religion, marriage can be done with a record that it has inbred puberty and is financially and spiritually capable. Therefore, religion legalists choose who when to marry young. This is because young couples avoid free sex, which is clearly prohibited in religions and the state. As our Prime Minister said, marrying youth has several positive impacts, including it can fulfill sexual needs, prevent someone from having children in old age, and can reduce the burden on parents. Then to review what the leader of the opposition said about the loss of education opportunities for young girls. This can be overcome by non-formal education. As we know, in Indonesia, many students are married and have children. But this in fact does make it difficult for them to continue to study in education. The problem of marrying young is actually a classic problem. This kind of marriage has actually been practiced by Prophet Muhammad with Siti Aisyah, who is still underage. Actually, maturity does not depend on age but driven on intelligence and mindset. Therefore, anyone whose mind is mature and wants to get married, marriage can be done. Then about cervical cancer. It's true what our Deputy Prime Minister said. It can be prevented in various ways, like delaying pregnancy. Instead, by our member of government, that when Prophet Muhammad married Siti Aisyah, who was then 6 years old, Prophet Muhammad has intercourse with Siti Aisyah 3 years later, namely when Siti Aisyah was 9 years old. In addition, choosing a healthy lifestyle and increased knowledge about husband and wife relationship is one way to avoid infectious diseases such as HIV. Nonetheless, one touch on the problem of worrying about the level of poverty in a region, our country, due to young marriage. In developed countries such as South Korea and Japan, they provide allowance for their citizens who want to get married to the lack of interest of their citizens to get married. And in our country, Indonesia, the government has provided pre-employment facilities which will later become a bridge for them to support life in the future. So, what else is there to worry about from getting married at a young age? Thank you.
Thank you. Last but not least, for the whip of opposition to give the conclusion.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, to let me closing this debate for this topic. I will complete my teammates for opposition. So, as we are opposition side, think that there's no right that government is always problem with marriage in a young age because we know that eliminating the age limit for marriage has a lot of negative impacts that will result in the early marriage, including hindering aspect of education and self-development. It is necessary to explain once again the occurrence of child marriage, but there are still many parents who do not care about this. In addition, children who do not marry early can have a greater opportunity to study and develop their potential. However, early marriage makes children do not have the opportunity to chill life messy and disorganized. And Islam is not a standard of definition regarding the minimum of maximum age of marriage. It depends more on the condition of each community because it may depend on the geographical and cultural condition. And we know that in the Quran, Surah An-Nur verse 33 also mentioned an advice for young people who have plans and desire to get married, both men and women. While a man desires to he has the ability to marry. And those who are not able to marry should keep their chemistry for self and Allah gives them the ability by His grace. Let me tell you about the story for the Aisyah and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Siti Aisyah had been proposed by someone before the Prophet, which showed that the people at the time had accepted this commission. This story also indicates that Aisyah is ready to marry. Another narration also mentioned that the Prophet Muhammad interfered with her when Siti Aisyah was 19 years old. Even if this story of the Prophet marrying Siti Aisyah at a very young age is true, that someone who forced himself to marry and marry someone at an early age is an ignorant and arrogant person. The person is he considers himself the same and the Prophet. Meanwhile, the Prophet has special privileges and duties which are mentioned from Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Of course, it will not be appropriate to use an excuse in the name of Prophet's marriage to do the same with the Prophet. In each country, a person's ability to marry is usually associated by the function of marriage. If a person has not been able to fulfill the function that have been set, then it is better for him to postpone marriage. Marriage does not only have a biological function. There are many other functions of worship which are commanded in Islam, including the function education, religion, economy, and love. All of this function can work well if someone already has maturity. Okay, next. So we decided marriage is not about age and young or mature. We need married by ourselves. You cannot compare marriage with A, B, C, D. It cannot. Thank you very much.
That's all for our today's debate. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.